So last week saw the release of the final installment of the Tales of Arcadia franchise, Trollhunters Rise of the Titans. And the response has been mixed, I guess. Previous installments have been met with a lot of acclaim, but whilst critics have enjoyed this film, audiences are way less sure of it. And this response has definitely taken me by surprise, but after watching the film, I kind of understand why. It's not that I thought it was bad per se, but more that it was a little disappointing, with the ending being extremely underwhelming. That being said though, there were things that I did like. So today I want to run through the things I did like, and also what I thought was bad, and try to figure out whether I like this film or not. So with that being said, let's jump into the review. I think one of the big things that people really didn't like about this film was that it completely wiped away everything they'd become attached to about the shows. It took all the stakes, all the storylines, and all the character development and said, nope. Basically, it ensured that everything we'd watched and invested our time in didn't matter at all. And honestly, in 2021, I have no idea why these types of lame endings are even a thing anymore. It's the kind of ending you might read in a bad fan fiction, with the author thinking it's the most original, exciting, and innovative concept that's ever been put to screen. Spoiler alert, it isn't. And to me, the most unforgivable part of this ending is that in the end, after going back in time, Jim decides to not pick up the amulet and just lets Toby have it. And I mean, why would you do this? If you're the only person that can semi-predict what's going to happen, why would you leave the fate of the world to chance? It just doesn't make sense. And normally I wouldn't even be all that upset about this, but I had to sit through a full movie of Jim not knowing if he's still the Troll Hunter, whining about how he isn't good enough and that his powers are failing him, only to at the end realise that he is indeed the true Troll Hunter and the hero the world needs. I had to sit through 100 minutes of Jim's teenage angst, and then you go and throw that away and say, nah, the amulet can actually pick anybody. Jim was never really all that special. Haha, you've wasted the last 5 years. Ha, sucked in. Wasn't half the film talking about destiny being real? Jim's destiny was surely to be the Troll Hunter, wasn't it? Otherwise, what was the whole point of Unbecoming in Season 2? Wasn't the whole point of that to prove that he was always meant to be the Troll Hunter? Otherwise, bad things would happen? Guess not. Plus, then there's the fact that Jim fully kills everybody he knows. He reverses time so that only he remembers and then starts changing things. So this means the versions of his friends that he knew and loved will never exist, because the things they go through won't happen in the same way. And this is especially true for the Acaridian babies. They will just fully never be born. If I went back in time and accidentally interrupted my own conception, a disgusting thought, and then my parents went on to have another kid later on, that wouldn't just magically be me, even if they gave them the same name. Even if Jim does let them kiss and conceive the babies, that doesn't mean they'll be the same babies. It's still a roll of the dice, and most likely it won't be what they had previously. And the dankest part of this ending is that Steve and Aja are just like, yeah, that's a great idea. I just had a bunch of kids, and now they're all going to stop existing forever. But that's okay. Look, it sucks that a bunch of your friends died, but erasing everybody in the universe except yourself so you don't feel guilty is cold as ice. And then in the end, we don't even know if it all works out. They just leave it open-ended. And sometimes that's okay. But in this context, I think it just made it feel even less satisfying, because now, not only did all the cool stuff that happened not happen, but we don't even know how anything's going to change. And if they remade the show, which I do not think they will, it would be boring as. All we would be doing is watching Jim try to steer Toby in a similar direction without letting anybody die. And also, side note, I get that he's trying to set up his mum and Strickler, but wasn't he full-on evil at this point? Like, fully evil. Like, fully willing to murder children evil. Maybe take a rain check on that until you resolve his issues. And I think another big complaint a lot of people had about the movie was that they felt that many characters weren't used very effectively at all. And I do have to agree for the most part. This film was the culmination of the Tales of Arcadia, drawing in the characters from all the different shows they've made and having them face off against villains set up by wizards. And yet, for the most part, it was the Jim Lake Jr. show. And yes, he's the principal character, but that doesn't mean literally every other character needs to take such a brutal backseat. Now, obviously, there are certain characters that have specific roles, and I think they were mostly used fine. Blinky, Arg, Toby, Claire, even Vivato's Vex. They all sort of have set roles, more as side characters who support the main heroes, and thus you don't need to see them have huge arcs, even though Toby actually did this one time, and it was actually very good. But Aja, Krell, and Dooksy, 3 characters that make up the 4 true main characters as presented by Trollhunters, 3 Below, and Wizards, were hardly used at all compared to what I think people were expecting. I mean, what was Aja's arc? In 3 Below, she's fun-loving, vibrant, and funny. Yes, she has a serious side, but it's balanced with other traits. Here she's not very fun, she's overly serious, and the movie tries to position her as being rude or unreasonable. It tries to make you feel as though her plan to evacuate everybody from Earth is so immoral and that she's undermining Jim, even though her plan is smart and would save heaps of lives, but whatever. And also, she is right. Jim's not performing at his optimum and he's letting the team down. Why should they keep fighting without a backup plan? But back on track, she's presented in a completely different way to how she was before, with not much explanation as to why. Seriously, I don't remember a single lively from her at all. And I get the end of the world's not the time for jokes and smiles, but literally every other character does it. But back to what I said earlier, what is her arc? To play devil's advocate to Jim? To have some weird pregnancy storyline with Steve? And I know for a fact a lot of people hated this storyline, and I get why. Male pregnancy stories are almost always deeply weird and should remain closed off in the darkest reaches of the dankest fanfictions. The same weird fanfictions that use pack dynamics and alphas and omegas and all that super weird stuff that pulls us further from God's salvation. If you don't know, don't Google, live in blissful ignorance a little while longer. That being said though, I'm going to activate hypocrite mode and say it did make me laugh, if only because Steve always has the most random funny storylines. From befriending the local nerd and forming the Creep Slayers, to having the school coach date his mum, to falling in love with an alien princess and meeting Lancelot and learning to be a knight, and finally concluding with falling pregnant from kissing his girlfriend 7 times. It was funny, but whilst it was funny and made me laugh, considering the payoff was, hey, we have 7 kids now, let's erase them forever. It makes me wish it had never happened at all, and makes me feel like they completely botched her storyline. And let's not even get started on Krell. Remember Krell, the second main alien, the one who's actually super close with the humans? He doesn't even do anything, he just stands around and does smart things. That's it. Completely forgotten. And Dukesy. Oh, Dukesy. The Arcane Order were your villains. Yours. And I'm pretty sure you're actually the strongest member of the group. Not one of the strongest, the strongest. Surely you are. You're a master wizard. But he doesn't do much either. He isn't even there when the final villain's killed off. He's just watching from the sidelines with a sad face. He doesn't even get to farewell his familiar Archie, who they get rid of in lame fashion towards the climax of the film. And his story mostly revolves around being friends with a talking plant. Literally all his character is since the end of Wizards is a sad wizard. His mentor dies, Archie's locked away forever, and then his arcane nature friend is killed right before his eyes. He loses everything and they're just like, yeah, he doesn't need to avenge them, or use his awesome magic guitar. He could just be a pawn for Jim's storyline. Yikes. And that's not even touching on the more minor characters like Eli, Steve, Archie, etc., who also do almost nothing of note besides the pregnancy as I mentioned earlier. Imagine chatting up Eli and then not doing anything with him. We didn't even get to see Not Enrique or Noam Chomsky. How will I go on if I don't know what happened to them? For a film that was supposed to be the culmination of all the franchises like Infinity War and Endgame were for the MCU, this one definitely wet the bed in terms of actually making you feel as though the characters matter at all. Only Jim mattered. Every other character you're just told to care about for a few minutes, especially if they're about to be killed off. But at least that does lead me into something I did like. They tried their best not to have too much plot armor. Obviously they did have a little because you can't go killing off your main protagonist in the first battle, but they really did try to thin out the ranks and make the villains seem like they actually know what they're doing to some extent, which I did appreciate. I found Strickler's death was especially good, if a bit predictable, and I thought that Toby's whole arc of feeling like he isn't a hero only to prove himself in the very end, and be the one that truly saves Jim at the cost of his own life, was really well executed as well. But it's a damn shame that all of it doesn't matter because of the ending. And it wasn't like the story was bad either. It was a pretty stock standard superhero type team up thing, and from that perspective it did work well and it kept me engaged throughout the majority of the film, to the point that I didn't really think about how some of the characters had been wasted. I just thought, oh wow, they're really going hard with those character deaths, or wow, giant gun robot, or Camelot merged with Acaridian tech's awesome, or even just thinking the jokes themselves were pretty funny. And I think if they'd kept the kind of sad ending as the true ending, it would have been fine. It would have been nothing revolutionary, but not bad, and the flaws could have been mostly swept under the rug by a fun and enjoyable experience. But because the time warp ending kinda sucked, it just amplified everything that was not good about the film, and makes you feel worse about it because you now have the regret that comes with knowing you wasted your time watching this film and received a bad ending. And I truly hate that this review's coming across like I think the film's trash, because it isn't. But if you're eating a decent sandwich and on the final bite you realise the bread's covered in mould, you're not going to think fondly of the sandwich, no matter how good the first bite was. It's sad because now when I rewatch the show, it's just going to feel tainted knowing that literally none of this matters in the end as Jim will just redo it all anyway. And yeah, that brings me to the end of the review. And I'm sad. I was looking forward to this and the ending was just meh. Anyway, those are my thoughts and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the film? Like it? Hate it? If you did like it, please tell me why. Because I feel like I'm struggling to think of the parts I liked. You never know. Maybe you'll sway me to your side again. Anyway, make sure to leave a comment and let me know.